Welcome to the Celebrating Women podcast, co-hosted by Mandee Montana and Ashley Fisher, a podcast that celebrates women, their issues, their thoughts, their lives, conversations that celebrate their gifts, their talents, their courage. It's the Celebrating Women podcast. Presented by Hand & Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Hey there, it's Mandee. And I've shared the secret of where I go to relax and where I like to unwind. It's Hand & Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler. They really have become an essential part of my self-care routine. I go monthly, sometimes more frequently, to get a massage, and they help me with my skincare too. I recently went to have a facial and I decided it was time for an upgrade. I chose the Nano Infusion Experience. And if you are looking for the top service for your skin, this is it. I left not only looking fabulous, but really feeling that way too. Holly took amazing care of me and my skin was so radiant and glowing. Y'all, I was dewy for days. This process infuses your skin with custom serums without needles or downtime, and it's customized for your needs. It might be my favorite skincare treatment yet. The next time you have a special event or you want to splurge and indulge yourself, this is what you want: the Nano Infusion upgrade to your dermalogical facial. Schedule now by visiting Hand & Stone Massage and Facial Spa, located in Cumberland Shopping Center in Tyler, or book online at handandstonetyler.com.
Welcome back to the Celebrating Women podcast. I'm Ashley Fisher.
I'm Mandee Montana. And we have a very special guest today that's joining us virtually. This is the first time Ashley and I have done this. Normally our guests are in studio, but Jamie is so special that we've decided to invite her in virtually from Colorado.
Hello.
Hi, Jamie. Okay, so you and I know each other from way back in the day. I don't know, maybe 2007 or 8 is when we met.
So it would actually be 2009.
Okay, I'm glad you know. You've got a better memory than I do.
It would be 2009 because, you got to remember, it was that 2010 era when chevron and bobble necklaces and zebra print were in.
Yes.
We sold those. And
Good
do y'all
years.
know Pico dresses?
Yes. I think I still have one hidden in my closet.
I have one. I found it in my closet yesterday.
What
and
was
I was
it?
like,
It's like the opposite of a dolman. So it's got really skinny arms, but it's really kind of big and baggy in the middle. It's like wide in the middle. Is that right,
They're
Jamie?
so
Yeah,
comfortable.
I never appreciated that because of my body shape, but yes.
I had a hard time wearing
I
them
found one in
too.
my closet, and I was like, they're bringing back all the bad stuff. I need them to bring these back. They were so comfortable.
They were comfortable. I forgot about that. I had a really cute chevron dress.
I did
My
have
arm was
all
so
the
big.
chevron and all the big costume jewelry and zebra purse and
Yeah, it's good stuff.
it's good stuff.
I always wonder if it was just in the South, though, because one thing I've learned living in Colorado is what is fashionable in the South, whether it be makeup, hair, clothes, even in the Southern influencers is not other places.
Bless our hearts.
Some of it bleeds in. There's
Yeah.
some that's the same. Kind of, I guess, the overall style, but the Southern, I call it the Southern boutique style. The Southern boutique style is very niche to the South.
Yes.
To where now that I haven't lived there for almost 5 years, looking in, I can see someone and be like, oh, they're from the South.
Yep.
Just immediately. I'm like, oh yeah, they're whether it be by their hair, their clothes. And it's usually some is very distinct and some isn't. So looking back at these trends that were so big, I'm like, well, were they big everywhere or were they only big in the South? I don't know.
We're but you know what? Either way, we were feeling it and we felt good. So.
The chevron maxi dresses? Are you kidding? The tube chevron maxi dresses? I think everybody had 3.
Yep.
Pretty much. Well, so that's where we met, Belladonna Day Spa and Boutique. And Jamie, I don't know if I've shared this with you, but I've shared it with other people when I'm like, oh, I have this friend, Jamie. You were the nicest, most refreshing, lovely front desk person I had ever encountered in Tyler. I was just blown away by how thoughtful you were, and you always had a smile on your face, and I just felt so welcomed by you every time I entered, and that was not the case when I went other places. And that was my first impression of you, but it's who you are, and it's how I know you, and I just have wanted to actually be better friends with you ever since. I just thought you were lovely.
Well, I appreciate that. try not to be a shitty person in all aspects of life.
And you know what? The world thanks you because there are plenty of those.
Yes.
So you guys have known each other for quite a while. This is the first time Jamie and I are meeting, and it's across a computer screen. So Jamie, before we kind of get into like, you know, the cool stuff that you're doing in life, I want to know more about you. Like, just like give us like whatever form of like your background, like where'd you come from? How'd you grow up? Like what, you know, what interested you that led you to the point that you're at today, all that good stuff.
So the reason why I'm so funny is because my backstory is filled with trauma.
Oh, that makes for the funniest people.
Yes.
I also have really dark humor, so if I joke about something, don't be like, okay.
Oh, God. No.
No, so I grew up with a single mother, and I was an only child until I was like 9, and she worked for the correction system. She was gone a lot. I was essentially raised by babysitters. I went to a home daycare, and I was with, her name was Lisa Erskine, and I was with her for years. She would get me up in the morning for school. I was with her on the weekends. And then my mother had another child with her boyfriend when she was, I don't know her age. I think I was 9. And we moved back to Rusk because we used to live in Marlin, which is near Waco, Texas. And so my mom, because her boyfriend just kind of, you know, split whenever he found out she was pregnant, moved back to her hometown of Rusk so that she'd have her friends and family while she raised these 2 kids that were almost a decade apart.
Wow.
And when my sister was 20 months old, she got leukemia, ALL. And as an 11-year-old I remember when my mom came home from the doctor's appointment and was telling everyone, because we were all in this, like all the friends were gathered. I remember looking at this teenager who was there and saying, "What's cancer?" Because no one explained it to me. To this day, no one explained it to me. It was all stuff I just kind of learned. Like, and so he looked at me and he just went, "It means she's sick." And I said, "Bad sick?" And he was like, "Yeah." And so she battled that for probably 3 years, and she did go into remission. But in those 3 years, she was like quarantined in Dallas Children's a lot. So from there, I was also passed around to like different people's houses to who could watch me, because my mom was a single mom. So she had to, you know, she had to quit her job. She had to go back and forth with my sister to the doctor, to chemotherapy, and all the stuff that my sister went through was like extremely traumatizing. She doesn't remember it, and I'm so thankful for that, because God, I can't imagine what that would do to a person to remember all the stuff that she went through.
Is she healthy now?
She is. She is. God, how old am I? She's got to be in her 20s now.
I understand. I ask myself that question sometimes too. Wait a minute.
I'm 37, so she's probably 28 or 29, something like that. And so from there, our family nosedived into poverty because my mom had to quit her job. She only had a GED, and she had had a really good job with the prison system. But then once she had quit and we had moved, she couldn't get back on. She had tried, but she couldn't. And because the prison in Rusk, where we lived, they just happened to have one, had like a waiting, like a laundry list of just people wanting to get on and stuff. And so there was at one point, whenever my sister was in and out of the hospital, that we lit, you know, the little buckets, canisters that you see in gas stations with like a kid's picture on it and like donations where people drop their quarters. We literally lived off of that and like welfare.
Wow.
Oh,
when
Jamie.
my sister was sick. So when you see those, you don't think anything about it, but that's literally what we lived on. And now when I see them, I just like any change I have, I throw in there, or if I have a cat or whatever. And so, which, you know, now technology's come so far. So now they have GoFundMes and all this kind of stuff. So it's a whole different ballgame. But back then we didn't have that. Because this was in the 90s. So from there, it was kind of everything went downhill from there. We were dirt poor. My mother, I look and act just like my dad, who is my mother's mortal enemy.
That's tough.
So the older I got, I guess the more pronounced it was. And she did not like me at all. And I think a lot of it came from she was very stressed with having 2 kids. She had just been traumatized herself by watching her child almost die.
Yeah.
And so she didn't have a spouse. She never dated. She had no one to kind of share this stress with. And so it kind of came out in anger towards me. She's very like emotionally and verbally abusive to the point where now people like adults that were that were close to our family have approached me and been like, I just want to let you know that I'm sorry. Like I never spoke up. We saw how you were treated. Like I was kind of like the forgotten child that was pushed to the side. And so that is very not a straight up good time whenever you're a teenager going through that.
No.
And so statistically, and I learned this when I was in college from one of my professors because we were talking about our backgrounds and stuff. Statistically, how I grew up, I should be living that same life. I should be living in poverty. There's only like 1 or 2% of people that grow up in that environment that get out.
Yep.
And I didn't know that. And I think a lot of it had to do with the friends I surrounded myself with were all, did well in school. I didn't hang out with people that did drugs or that really drank in high school. Like I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
And so it kind of stayed the same way all through college. And then I just kind of went to college and I was just trying to find myself. I went everywhere. I lived in Tyler for a couple of years and went to school there. I moved to San Marcos for a couple of years. I actually this is before you could get your certification in a weekend. I went to dental assisting school. It was an actual college. It was called San Antonio College of Medical and Dental Assistants. And it was a 9-month program. And I'm not kidding. Like a year after that is when they switched it to where you could just get certified in like a weekend.
Oh
and I was
my
like,
word.
Gosh.
$12,000 down the drain.
Oh, that hurts.
It was so expensive. And I worked for a non-profit pediatric dentist in Dallas, and they like moved. Had a lot of things, and I would go to the different clinics, and I hated it. So when my roommate and I, who had actually lived with me in San Marcos, when we moved back to Tyler, I was like, what am I going to do now? And I'm one of those people where I didn't feel like I needed to start my career at 24.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'll figure it out when I figure it out, because I didn't want to do something I hated for the rest of my life.
Man, that's wisdom.
Yeah.
When I moved back, that's when I started working at, I actually worked at, what was it called? It was where Richard and all the hairstylists worked before Belladonna.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It
called?
wasn't Tony and Guy, was it?
No, it wasn't called, it's not fat. What was it called?
Not Rumors. Shoot. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'll remember it later and I'll message you and be like, it was this.
Yep. I know, because I know what you're talking about. Because didn't,
like Lisa,
Cutie Pie come there
Mandee.
too? Mandee. Yes.
Yeah. It was all of them. And so I worked there with them. Loved it. Tiffany, we worked together. We were both the receptionists there. And then he merged with Belladonna. And so I started working for Belladonna, and God, I worked there until I got married.
Yeah. I remember when you and Tiffany both got married while you were working there, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes.
I think, did I get married first or did she get married first?
I don't remember. I just remember both of you did. And you had such beautiful wedding photos. And I was like dating some jerk at the time or something. And I was just like so happy for you guys. And like,
love that
day,
for you.
Yeah. You're like, I am not at all jealous.
No. And I'm a few years older than you guys. So I was like, I want this too, but they look amazing. And I'm so happy for them.
Yeah. So I worked there. I had a great time working at Belladonna. I met a lot of people. And when I worked at Belladonna is when I kind of started to learn how to color in my eyebrows and how to do my hair and how to dress better, because I didn't know how to do any of that. And I know people are like, okay, that's a shallow thing to like. But I'm like, well, when you grew up poor and you grew up with a mom who didn't teach you any of it, when you do finally start to learn it, it's like.
That's huge.
Hyper fixated on it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And rightfully so.
It's a big piece of your identity, what you show to the world. So that
Yes.
I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I started working at an orthopedic office just temporarily because I'd gotten married. So I was like, I'll just take like a temp job until I kind of decide what I wanted to do. And I had been like going to college like and all this time and stuff for criminal justice. And I got that degree and I don't use it. So I started working. It was supposed to just be a 6-week job while this girl was out on maternity leave, and I worked for Dr. Ryan Patterson in Tyler. He is him and his wife Stacy are like the best people.
Aw.
If you ever do anything to your hand or arm, go see him.
Aw.
Seriously, they are just the greatest people. They really are. They're both so thoughtful and nice. And I worked there for years until my husband got transferred to West Texas. And anyway, the girl didn't come back from maternity leave, and they were like, "Do you just want to stay on?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely. This is definitely criminal justice. I will."
This is so what I went to school for. So yes,
Yeah.
I would.
So I worked for another hand surgeon in West Texas for a couple of years until my husband got transferred to Colorado because we hated West Texas, hated everything about it.
I can't imagine why, Jamie.
Oh, I know. Oh, God. And then we moved to Colorado, and I love it here.
Aw.
I got pregnant I had Allison, my daughter, right whenever Ray found out we were going to be moving. And so I just was like, I'll just stay at home. Well, we moved here in 2019. And less than a year later,
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
So I'm in COVID. I've got this baby.
Wow.
We have our older son, but he's like 11 years older. We adopted him in 2016, I think. He was 7.
Wow.
He's been with us for 8 years, whatever that math is. And he's about to be 16 next month. So,
wow.
Yeah. So I had these 2 kids. One's old enough to, kind of hang out on his own, except for I had to help him with school, which was a nightmare because I am not a schoolgirl. And then I had this baby, and I was just kind of like, So I was like, I don't even, you know what? This is so embarrassing. You know what inspired me to write my first book?
What?
A freaking Taylor Swift documentary.
I love
That
it.
is not crazy. And you look like Taylor Swift. Like you've dressed up in Halloween, like, haven't you? Maybe years ago. Am I imagining
yeah,
this?
I think years ago, because when I was younger, I did, when my hair was blonde.
Yes.
And you could see my cheekbones.
Oh, stop it, girl. You're gorgeous. The documentary inspired you. Is it the like Miss Americana?
No, so it was the one where she's like at the cabin talking about writing folklore.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she was talking about the song August. And first of all, I misinterpreted the song Cardigan.
Okay.
Because, August, Betty, and Cardigan are a trilogy. They go, August is from the other woman's point of view, Betty is from the guy's point of view, and then Cardigan is from Betty's point of view.
Brilliant. Golly.
And
we
so
need to
I
talk
thought
more about
Cardigan
that sometime because I don't know any of the good stuff.
Yeah, I need to. Well, now I need to just go watch the documentary. So.
Yes, that too.
Keep going.
I thought Cardigan was Betty's point of view, saying that her and James didn't end up together, just kind of looking back. That's what I thought. Totally misinterpreted it. They ended up together. I didn't know that. At the time, I thought they didn't. And so I'm watching this, and when I saw that and I realized that they ended up together, I was like, wait, how would he cheat on her with this other girl for literally months, an entire summer, and then her take him back, and he's just like, oh, I was 17, it was a mistake. And I was like, that didn't make sense. And I was like, and what about this other girl? She's in love with him. How did this happen? Like, I'm literally sitting there like, this doesn't make sense. How would this work out that this would all work out how it did? So I just kind of sat down and started to make this own story in my head about, and I don't know if you know this, Mandee, I wrote a YA romance.
Is it
called
August Rain? Yes, I have a copy of it. I haven't read it, but I do own it.
So my friend Heather helped me with it. And so we wrote this whole story around it. And it was so much fun to write. It was my first book to ever write. So we've talked about, we have to go back and rewrite it. It is just,
well,
it's your baby though. It's that first one,
And so when I finished that, I had this dream about, did you read The Compeer? You read The Compeer?
Yes, I read that, the whole series.
I had this dream about Thad and Winnie and the Conduit Brides.
It was a dream?
Random. In a dream. And I woke up, and they didn't have names in my dream. It was just it was a prince. There were 4 princes, is originally what it was. And this girl, and then these conduit brides. And he didn't want to marry a conduit bride. He wanted to marry her. And so I woke up, and I was like, oh. And I immediately picked up my phone and voice recorded it. I sent
that's
a voice
so
recording
smart.
to Heather, I think. And I was just like, I need to tell you this before I forget it all. And I just kind of go on. And so then I sat down and I started world building. And I start figuring out. And so originally when I started on the project, I was calling it The 4 Princes. And, then I was like, well, it doesn't make sense that a prince would have to marry someone. So they're going to have to be kings. And so then I was like, okay, well, so then I just started world building, and I went from there, and I sat down and wrote it. I wrote the compeer in about 6 weeks, which you can tell if you read it.
It's not bad, Jamie. Don't. It's a fun read. I loved it.
It's a really easy read, and
yes,
it's the first book in a fantasy series, and it's only like 84,000 words, and that it should have been longer. So I'm actually, so I wrote that whole trilogy. Each book got better and better because my writing improved. And then when I finished that trilogy is when I got the idea for the Umbra King. And the idea that I got is I was mid voice message talking to my friend about the book Lightlark. Of all books, I haven't even read it. There was a lot of discourse around it on Book Talk.
Okay.
And we were just kind of discussing it back and forth. And I stopped. And I don't even know why. That book didn't inspire this. It's while we were talking about it, the other side of my brain was just like going.
Uh-huh.
And I stopped and I said, you know, it would be a crazy ending to the first book in a series. And then she's not talking back to me, by the way. I'm sending a voice message. And then I just say what happens at the end of the Umbra King. And I send it to her. And she writes me back and she was like, that is so cruel. I love it. So I was like, so then I sat down.
But okay, hold on. I have to stop you because like I'm thinking about like your whole story here from, childhood up until this point. And there's so many things that like, if we were sitting with coffee, I'd be like, okay, hold on. And I got to ask you about all this. But for the listener who's like going, whoa, like, wow, did that story turn in such a cool way? Where were you always a writer? Was that just a skill that you had, or did you go to classes? Like, where did that piece come in?
No, not at all. I did creative writing my senior year in high school and I went to state. I just randomly did it. My English teacher was like, hey, we need people to do this. Your English papers are, pretty good. Do you want to do it? So I said, sure. Never wrote again.
Wow.
After that, I will say this though. Any assignment I had in college where I had to write a paper, if it was over a book, if it was over anything, this is so awful. A lot of times I wouldn't read it if it wasn't something I was interested in. And so I would just look up like Spark Notes, and then I was able to write papers on it, and I would get like the highest score you could get every time.
Same.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's really the only kind of quote writing I did.
Okay.
So but I am an avid reader. I read between 150 to 250 250 books a year.
Okay. There's your secret sauce, people.
I read all the time. And so when you read that much, your brain kind of absorbs how the storytelling goes.
Right.
And when I was like, oh, I'm going to sit down and write this story about these Taylor Swift songs,
That's amazing.
I just kind of put that in. And that's why I didn't know anything about writing. Everything I learned about writing, I Googled or I learned on the internet. And I had a very, very low budget editor who was essentially not even an editor. They were just a proofreader, which is why my first few books they're not that great. The Umbra King is the book that changed my career. It was the book that when it came out, it was my best writing yet, it was my best storytelling yet, because part of writing also isn't just the technical style and the creative style, it's the storytelling. It's how you build these character relationships. How does the plot go? Are there plot holes? Especially with fantasy books. How is your world building? Is it an info dump? Can you understand it? And so that book changed my career. When it launched, it went to the top of the charts. And on Amazon, because that's the only place I released it. Because I self-published it.
Wow.
So I didn't have a publisher behind me. It wasn't distributed in bookstores. It was literally just on Amazon. And so it went to the top of like the Amazon charts and the categories that it was in. It hit like the top, I think it was like 1,000 on Amazon. And there are literally like millions and millions and millions of books on Amazon. Like it was crazy. And I just didn't expect it. And within less than a month of it being released, I had foreign publishers reaching out to me. I had audiobook publishers reaching out to me. And I was like, I don't even know what this is. This did not happen with my trilogy. And so I reached out to I have a friend named, she's an author. Her name's Elizabeth Muse, and I love her. She's a good friend of mine. And I messaged her and I was like, I got this email. I don't know what to do. It was from a German publisher. I was like, I don't know what this means. And so she was like, she's been in the industry for a long time. So she was like, okay, here's what you're going to do. I'm going to send you a few websites for a few agencies, and you need to reach out to them for sub rights management. And what that means is you get representation, and they handle, if any, like they'll submit your stuff to foreign publishers, audiobooks. If there's film, they'll do film. And so I was able to get on with Brower Literary. They've been so great. They got back to me in a few days, and they picked me up, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I told them my other author friends, and they were like, I don't think you understand how hard it is to get an agent. And I was like, I don't know anything about it. I don't, honestly, I'm
just out here.
And so that's when I kind of started to realize just how successful the Umber King was, because when it happens to you, you're just kind of like, oh, this is cool. Like you don't 100% grasp it. And so it pretty much consistently stayed towards the top of the charts. It was on bestsellers list for, it might still be on there. I don't even check the list anymore. And not because like, oh, I'm on there, but because like if you fall off, it's like
not fun.
Oh God.
Yeah, you don't need that roller coaster ride, I'm sure.
Yeah, my numbers have stayed pretty consistent. And then the second book, it's just a duology. When it came out in March, that's when, I mean, that was like the life-changing moment. It was insane. It was absolutely insane whenever that happened. And so it's just been this whirlwind. Like, I can't announce the countries or anything because of legalities and stuff. And they have to announce it first. But my book is going to be translated into 2 different languages as of now.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So that's really cool. I've been invited. So I did my first book convention this month. It was a small one. I'm glad I did a small one because it's very stressful. I've never done it before. I've done a handful of Barnes and Noble signings. And then coming up in April, I have a book convention called Readers Take Denver. And I think there's going to be like close to 2,000 readers there, which is insane.
That's cool.
And then I managed to get into a Polycon, which is, there are 2 book conventions that are pretty much like the biggest book conventions here in the States, especially for indie authors. And they have thousands of people. Their tickets sell out within like, Book Bonanza's tickets sell out within minutes. A Polycon, I think they're sell out within minutes as well.
Whoa.
Like, it's where people like sit by it's like getting Taylor Swift tickets.
Yeah.
People will sit by their computers. And I managed to get into a Polycon.
Wow.
And so that's Readers Take Denver and a Polycon are a week apart. And Readers Take Denver is luckily here. It's like an hour from me. But a Polycon is in Washington, D.C.
That's awesome.
So I'll be flying, cross country to go.
So, okay, real quick, orient the listeners to like today, where are you? Like, how many books do you know the numbers? Like, how many books have you sold to date? Like, are you in stores now? Are you still selling mostly virtually on Amazon?
Yes, I only sell on Amazon. My books, they're in like random Barnes and Noble. They're in random bookstores. I don't even know where they all go. People buy that through this company called Ingram Spark. I don't know who buys it. I don't know any of that. My agent handles all of that. I just handle the Amazon stuff.
Is that really fun to say?
It is.
I'm like so happy for you that you get to say that statement in your life. I love it.
You know that about a month or 2 ago, I was having a discussion with some friends, and how this came about is random, but I looked up how many books I had sold or had the equivalent of being read, because I put my books on KU, so there's like pages read. So between that and the orders that I've had gone out of just the Umber King alone, it was like 23,000.
What?
Or something
Wow.
like that.
Jamie, that's awesome.
So
that's awesome.
I didn't even look up Eternum. I didn't look up the trilogy or any of the other stuff. I just looked up Umber King, just because it was like to kind of compare to something is what we were doing. And so I didn't realize it was that much. And I was like, oh my God. And so one thing I do over the past 3 days, I've done about another 6,000, which doesn't normally happen. But the reason I did is because I grew up poor. the only way that I was able to read books outside of school was like from the public library, or there used to be this really old used bookstore in Rusk that my mom would take me to, and you could trade books or you could buy one for like $1. And so I didn't get to just buy books when I wanted them.
Yeah.
So what I do every 3 months on Kindle is I put my books up for free.
Wow.
And because I'm like, I don't want people to feel the need to have to pirate a book, and not everyone can buy them, even if it's only a $5 ebook, which I try to price mine fairly moderate so that people can afford them. To some people, $5 is like the gas to get them to work.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to miss out on reading my books because they can't afford it. So every 3 months, I put them up for free on Kindle, and you can get the Kindle app for free on any device. You can download it on your phone, your computer, or tablet. And so it's absolutely free for them to be able to read it. And I do that every 3 months. And so I just did it yesterday. I did it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
I saw that in your stories, and I wondered, I'm so glad you're explaining it, Jamie, because I didn't know why you did that. I just thought, okay, well, maybe this is a way for her to expose herself to more readers. I didn't know your reasoning behind it. Now I'm like even more impressed.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've done it since I released.
Yeah. I've seen you do it several times. Yeah.
And so another thing I do, because a lot of people, this business, it is a business and it is all about making money, but I make enough money that it doesn't hurt me to give back. Then, even when I first started, I was doing the free ebooks. But one thing I've started doing with the Umber King and Eternum, because they've had such success, I started doing this in, I think it was December or January. I think it was January. There is an organization called Project Night Night. And what they do is they give a canvas tote with a security blanket, a stuffed animal, and an age-appropriate book to homeless children under the age of 12. And so every month, which I didn't get to do it in the summer, and whenever I didn't get to do it, I donated on my own just to kind of keep it up. But I will sell signed paperbacks from my website, which I do like one big order, and $10 from every book sold, which is essentially the profit, goes to that charity. And so that's the only way to get a signed paperback, unless you like win a giveaway or find me at a signing, because I don't sell them any other way. And so that's something that's really important to me, because gets books to kids who are even less fortunate than I was, which are kids in homeless shelters who are, in women's shelters with their parents and stuff. So I try to do that to kind of like give back. And then, that's it. Everything else I do is like all my TikToks that I never thought that at 37 years old I would have a TikTok account.
Oh, you crush it on TikTok. Like, I didn't know book talk was a thing until
it's a
massive
thing.
So you'll have to educate me, because I'm still TikTok ignorant.
On TikTok, there are niches.
Yeah.
And they all call them like so-and-so talk. So like there's gym talk, and there's like crochet talk. Okay. Literally. There's a talk for everything.
Okay.
And there's rug cleaning talk, which is weirdly addicting.
It's satisfying, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And so there's something called book talk, and it's where people do book reviews. There are authors who talk about their books. People make videos about their favorite books. It's a whole thing.
Speculate about world building of books that haven't come out and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
And so essentially with the Umber King, I never paid for an ad up until, I don't know, maybe May of this year.
Wow.
And so it was all advertising on TikTok that I did, which was just making videos. And another thing I did really kicked off the Umber King that some people are surprised that this would help is I gave out 800 ebook arcs of the Umber King, which is an advanced reader's copy. It's an ebook version that goes out before the book releases. And basically I put up this forum and I was like, anyone who signs up will get one.
Wow.
And so I gave out like 800. And so what that did was, whenever you do that, you can only expect about 25% to actually read it. And I had almost 50% read, which is pretty good.
That's awesome.
And so I had all reviews whenever the book released. There were people already talking about it. And so I didn't have to do any advertising.
I
Now,
remember
what
you
happens with the
releasing
book-
like the reviews and the quotes from people on and seeing your videos. And like, I mean, you would have something world building about the characters, and then I'd see like you'd pop up like the quotes from your readers. And I was like, how does she have these already? Like, I haven't read it yet. That's cool.
It was my ARC readers. And so
Awesome.
that was a big, part that got it out there. And so how it works in the indie world is every time you put out a book, your old books get a surge. And so whenever Eternum came out, people who hadn't read the Umber King, it got a surge. And so it kind of kept it up. And what I usually did was I released books every 5 or 6 months. Now there's a spinoff of that book that was supposed to come out this like fall/winter. But I've been having issues with my arms from working. It all started with Eternum because I was working like 18-hour days because I lost a bunch of edits. So I had to like go back through and do all that. And so I'm now having to do physical therapy, and hopefully I won't have to have surgery. I'm hoping PT works, but so I had to push that back. And so because of that, and this is very normal, my numbers have gone down a little, but not a lot. They've just gone down a little. And so I am now like, I started paying for ads like in the summer, I think. So now I'm actually having to pay for ads, which is like a new experience for me. And on TikTok, TikTok kind of has this algorithm thing where they want you to pay for ads. So if they realize that you're like an author or advertising something, they'll kind of make your views go down so that you'll have to pay for ads.
Don't you love that?
And so
we don't know anything about any of this.
And so that's one thing I've had to start doing, which is fine. But there's still a lot of people that talk about the Umber King on their own. Like, I think the hashtag the Umber King has like over 1 million views. Yeah, over 1 million views on TikTok. And I don't use the hashtag a lot.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, okay, so what, like, when you are, like, kids are in bed, you're at the end of your day, and you're just sitting, can you articulate what it means to you to have thousands and thousands of people reading the words that you have put to paper? Can you articulate, like, what that means and how that feels?
It's surreal to the point that it doesn't even register as being real. And I know that sounds weird, but it's almost like, because of how I grew up, because also, I didn't say this earlier, both of my parents died from illnesses. My dad died when I was 22. My mom died when I was 30. And then my older brother died from a brainstem glioma when I was 31. So when you basically have stuff like that happening your entire life, you always wait for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I've been doing. I'm like, okay, things are going really well. They continuously got better as this last 2 years has gone on. So what's going to happen?
When's the rug going to get pulled out?
It's very surreal, and it doesn't really register, and I don't know when it will. And that's what's weird, is I don't know when it's going to finally register that, hey, like, I don't know. And so looking at my numbers, I mean, there are thousands and thousands of people reading my book every day. So when I'm at night sitting there reading my own books, because I read, it's like how I decompress. It's weird to know that while I'm reading, there's people reading my book.
Yeah.
It's insane to just sit and think about.
Yeah. Well, and that's really such a connection point too. It's like, in movies, how, like, I'm thinking like Home Alone 2, where, Kevin is looking out the window and he sees the moon, and then across the way, like, his mom is in Florida, across the country, and she's looking at the moon, but it's like they're doing that at the same time. And it's like that thing that sort of connects them even though they're apart.
Yes.
How amazing to be, though, the author and creator of something that's such a connection point. I mean, that's just, and I have to say, like, it's amazing. It is amazing that with everything that you went through, that you chose to make good decisions growing up. You didn't let it, like, be a reason to be less or do less. And then you have gone so far as to do this thing that's incredibly creative, and then and that's a gift in itself, but then you go so far as to actually give it. I mean, that's just amazing.
It is.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
you can take the moment, breathe it in, pat yourself on the shoulder, be like, I'm pretty cool. Oops, sorry.
I will say the funniest part about this is is how I'm connected to these readers, because the Uber King is about a serial killer who hangs her victims from meat hooks, sews their hands across their chest, and then slits their throat.
Nice.
And then the whole thing is like, it's like a fantasy world that I completely made up. Just the whole thing is not real. And there's smut in it. And it's just...
There's good smut in it.
Whenever that's what connected it, that's what's the funniest part. Because I'm like, I just didn't think about it. Like, that is just an unhinged... an unhinged thing to connect people about. And when people ask me what my book's about, I clam up because I'm like, oh God. How am I going to explain this?
You really should just go read it.
Like, one time I was doing a Barnes and Noble signing, and I had this banner that had like character art of my male main character, and he's shirtless because obviously, and it says, give me smut or give me death.
Mm-hmm.
And it has like my logo on it, and this old man walks by, reads my sign, and he says, what is smut? And there was a girl named Claire helping me, and I just turned real slow to her, and I said, how would you describe smut? Like, is it a trope? Because there was not a chance in this world that I was going to say, oh, well, it's explicit scenes. And she looks at me, her eyes were wide, and she goes, I think it's a genre. So I just go back and go, it's just a genre.
There you go. That is a very delicate way to handle that.
That was the same day I had a dad bring his 12-year-old daughter up to my table.
No.
And he was like, she's interested to know what this is about. And I looked at her and I said, oh, how old are you? And she said 12. And I said, oh, honey, I can't sell you this. You have to be 18.
Oh,
I didn't even have an 18 and under bookmark to give her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were either about the book or they were about smut. So I was like, I'm so sorry, but when you're 18, come back. Yeah. And the funniest part about this is when they left that store, she was carrying a book called Twisted Hate, which is a very explicit book.
Oh, really?
And I'm watching him walk out, and I was like, either the dad doesn't care or he doesn't have a clue in the world.
I bet he has
no
idea.
That little girl knew what she was doing. She knew what she was going after. And we laughed so hard about that. I was just funny. Oh my God.
Okay, so this has got me curious. I'm going to tell on myself a little bit, but I'm also curious. Like when as a reader was the first time you encountered that kind of writing? Because I was probably like 13.
Yeah.
Okay, I was in my late 20s. I was already married.
Really?
I did not know that. I knew there were erotica books and I had like heard about it. But when I was like in high school, I read Sweet Valley Twins and Fear Street. Like I was not reading that stuff. Okay. I didn't even know it existed when I was in high school. And as I got older, I guess I knew it was out there in like erotica books. But I read another fantasy series that had it in there and I was like, oh God.
Well, that was kind of what your book did for me because it wasn't explicit really what I read early on. It was just kind of my introduction to like, it was V.C. Andrews. Are you familiar with that author?
I'm not.
Okay. So she has series. She's, I don't know, like maybe 12 series. These are old. They were my mom's books. So we're talking like maybe back in the 70s or 80s. The first book I think that she had a lot of success with was called Flowers in the Attic.
Oh, I've heard of that book.
So it's really weird and like incestuous even. But there's like, so it's like this dark, weird kind of sexy thing that's going on and you're like not sure how you feel about it. It makes you just feel kind of uncomfortable and strange. And I was like 13, 14 when I'm reading about it. And I was like one of the most like inexperienced, didn't have a boyfriend, didn't do any of that stuff really till college. Yeah. But at 14, I'm like reading all about it, like hiding in my room. Like, where's the next book?
I bought a romance novel at 14.
One One thing that I hear on Book Talk from a lot of people that are obviously a little bit younger than I am is they started reading this stuff when they were, 13, 14 years old from Wattpad and fanfic.
Oh, that makes sense.
There's a lot of it in that. And so they were able to access this stuff for free online. And so that's where they started reading it. And I was like, I didn't have that access because cell phones weren't even a thing until I was like a senior in high school.
Right.
And we had like the AOL dial-up.
Same.
So it was just that I just didn't know anything about it. And the books that I liked to read, even when I was in my 20s, were like, you know what? I don't know. I did read Jenna Jameson's biography when I was in like my early 20s.
Interesting.
But it wasn't a fiction book.
Right.
It was her autobiography.
Was it pretty explicit though?
It's very,
I would think,
very explicit. It's very dark. She had a very hard upbringing. And she's a porn star, so it's telling all about it. But my mind didn't register that as a smut book because it was a biography. So when I first read, I was always reading YA books. I used to love YA like fantasy and stuff.
Same.
And the first book that I encountered it in was actually marketed as a YA book.
Okay.
Which is a big discourse that has gone around about this book should not be marketed as YA. And it really shouldn't. And it was in there. And I was like, oh gosh, what is this? And so the next book in that series was even more explicit. Like the first book wasn't that explicit. And then the second book was even more explicit. And I was like, oh God. And I didn't mind it. I liked it. And so then I started reading. That's when I got into, after that, I was reading some sports romance. I think I read the series Pucked by Helena Hunting. And that has it in it. That was kind of my first, this is a smut book, which funny enough, it used to be a Twilight fanfic. I found that out recently and it traumatized me because you wouldn't know it. But I guess years ago on a fanfic site, Helena Hunting had published this series and the characters in it were like Edward and Bella and Emmett and all of them. But whenever she actually published it, she had to change the names and anything that had to do with Twilight for, like copyright reasons. But there are a lot of published books that used to be fanfic. The After series by Anna Todd was a One Direction fanfic. 50 Shades of Grey was, I believe it was also a Twilight.
It was Twilight. Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Christian,
wow.
Edward, Anna, Bella. When you know it, you're like, yeah.
Yes. And so I didn't know all this, and I just found this out like recently, and I was shocked. I was like, oh my God. And my friend Kit, she was like, you would be surprised, because she used to read fanfic, especially Twilight fanfic, like back in the day. She was like, you would be surprised how many published books are actually fanfic, specifically Twilight fanfic. It's kind of what kicked off this revolution.
Crazy? Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God.
But you know what I think it is? Twilight is so innocent. Like, but there's this undertone, there's this sexual tension undertone in it that carries throughout the series. And it's like, it takes forever and ever and ever and ever and ever to like have the moment with Edward and Bella. Right. And I think that like people are inspired by that, but they want to get there faster.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think it was, they read the book, the fourth book where it kind of happens, but like not explicit. And they were like, oh no, we want this. And then they just
they're like, no, let me rewrite this.
Right.
Yeah. And now fanfic is like really popular. There's one Harry Potter fanfic and it's called Manacled. I haven't read it because I have a hard time reading fanfic because when I read the original books or like see the original shows, my brain just can't process it. And it's what they call a Dramini fanfic. And so the two main characters are Draco and Hermione. And apparently this book Manacled is just, it's very dark. It's almost like a mix of like Handmaid's Tale with Harry Potter. And so people talk about how dark it is, but people say how good it is.
Yeah.
People talk about it all the time. And what's cool is it's fanfic, so it's free. So you can read it for free. I just haven't read it because my brain just doesn't process fanfic. But I thought that was really cool that, you know, these authors who just kind of got on here to make their own story within these worlds that are already, you know, built, that people love so much, have made these like worldwide sensations.
It's amazing. The first fanfic I think I ever read, and I'm not an avid reader of it just because I like books. I have a tendency to go there first. But the first fanfic I ever read was In Sync fanfic.
No way.
Yes. Like I downloaded like a Word doc on my like
awesome.
Oh, I mean, this would have been like 2001 and printed it out and put it in a notebook and read it. And it was like a love story about the guys like hooking up with some girls at some random in between concerts. I don't know. It was crazy. But
That is hilarious.
I didn't know that anything like that existed until then. But then I read some Twilight fanfic a little bit in between books or movies or something because I was just completely obsessed with that whole world and all the stuff. And I didn't like any of it. I was like, what the heck is this? Until I went to see the first movie. And then I was just like, oh, this is what this is. Because the vampire thing didn't do anything for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Until the love story.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh.
Okay. I'm not a big fan of vampire books either. I love shifters, like the wolf, like werewolf. And so when I read and watched Twilight, I was always team Jacob. And so my friend Kit, because her and I talk about this all the time, she's like, it's so funny that you love shifter books because it's like, it's obvious of how that came about because I was always team Jacob.
Isn't that funny?
But I really like the fated mates aspect of shifter books, which is like very prevalent in there. And then it's, you know, happens in a lot of fantasy books. And in all of my books, my fantasy books, there's fated mates. I just love that thought. It's like basically a magical soulmate where your souls are literally connected. And so I've just always thought that was really cool. And I love the shifter books. And it all started with Twilight.
Good job, Twilight.
Yeah.
What is so fascinating to me about your story as I'm sitting here and I'm picturing it and, you know, and listening to you is, you know, you've kind of done a lot of things. Like I'm thinking even vocationally, you've done a like what, dentist stuff and then, you know, like the
boutique stuff,
and then the law stuff. But have you seen like the intersection where like most of those things, if not all of those things, have come into play in your writing to where it's like it all makes sense?
What's funny is in the Umbra King, so it revolves around a prison world. And so one thing that I had a special interest and emphasis on whenever I was getting my degree was the correction system and prison reform and racial criminalization. And so in my book, the prison there is treated almost like a rehab center as opposed to a punishment center, with the exception of like people who do heinous crimes like malicious murders, you know, stuff like that. And like the main character is a serial killer, but she's a vigilante. She kills people who she catches in the act of doing something heinous. And so, and that's one theory of prison reform that people have, is that if it was treated more of a rehab as opposed to a punishment, that the repeat offender rate would be lower.
Yeah.
And so I kind of put that in there. And then there's actually a scene in there that one of my doctors, it's from a story he told me of whenever he was in doing something with an arm, sometimes they have to re-break it. And he pulled the arm off the table and broke it over his knee. And when he did, the loud crack made there was like a nurse intern in there, and it made her faint. Wow. Because it was so, and so in the Umbra King, there's a part where a doctor is setting a broken leg and it cracks really loud, and there's a maid in the room and she faints.
Wow.
And so
see, I just love that. I love that, you know, I don't know. I think that whereas somebody who might be like, oh, wow, that's a lot of random stuff. I love seeing how it all comes together and like, you know, like, I just think, I don't know, there's something about that that's just so fascinating to me. And so when you sit down and you write these books, who are you writing for? Are you writing for you and then it just so happens that people enjoy it? Or do you write with the reader in mind? Like, what is that process like?
So when I write, I kind of write what I want. But as a reader, I also do some things that's called writing to market, but I don't do it to specifically write to market. I do it because as a reader, it's stuff I love to read and like certain tropes. So like I write smut because I love to read smut. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, it has to be this, because, you know, I read a lot of YA and what's called closed door romance and stuff like that. But I write things I write the tropes that I like to read. Like, it's an enemies to lovers. It's, you know, has the found family trope, which is something that I'm kind of known for. That and the banter is what people comment on the most in my book.
Great banter.
Nice.
Yes.
And so it's stuff that I enjoy to read. And so that kind of comes out in my writing of these tropes that I like to read. And so I write to market, but I don't do it to necessarily write to market. I do it because I like it.
Yeah.
And I just think I just kind of make these stories that are really cool. But what I've learned as an author is there are certain techniques and story building lines that I do have to use to make people like it.
Yeah.
So that's why, you know, like with the Royals of Rodina series, which I'm actually unpublishing and rewriting next year when I finish the book I'm working on now, is each book got better because I learned stuff about storytelling that weren't in my books that people like. And one of those was my books needed to be longer. They needed more, you know, explanation. They needed more character development scenes, like between the characters, because in my mind, I know why they're the way they are,
Right,
but the readers need to know that as well. And so I kind of learned that. And so I guess that is writing for readers, because I'm writing stuff that they need. And I have people called beta readers. And what they do is they will read the story as I'm writing it or after I write it, way before it gets published, before it's even edited. And they'll read it and be like, tell me things that are confusing, that are cringy, that they want to see more, that they didn't like, that seems unnecessary, that, you know, oh, this is an info dump here. And one of my beta readers, and she's so essential to me, she's dyslexic. And so she doesn't understand stuff more than my other beta readers. And so with her, she helps me be able to write this story that is easy for everyone to read and understand.
That's awesome.
It helps make it flow better for someone that might have that difficulty.
That's
and
awesome.
So, you know, beta readers are so essential, and they really help me with that. So that is also writing for the readers. But I do also write things that I want to write because I'm writing it and I can.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm curious about the actual process of it, because what I've read about authors and seen on videos and stuff is that everybody kind of has their own process and it's different. And you start in different places, or like you said with one of your books, I think you said, you know, what you were inspired by a dream. And so you used voice notes to kind of like immediately capture what you experienced so that you could come back to it later. But when you sit down to write, like, what does it look like? Are you writing on a laptop? Do you have like world building notes surrounding you? Are you at home? Are you in an office?
Before I start actually writing, I have to world build because I do write fantasy. So that'll take some research because I will pull, and this is really common with fantasy, I'll pull stuff from like different cultures, folklore and mythology. And I have books and books and books of, you know, different cultures, you know, history and stuff like that. And so I'll do the research. I'll sit down and build it. With the one I'm writing now, I have this big poster board that has the map of the world drawn out with facts about the different kingdoms in that. And it's a huge poster board so that when I'm writing, I don't have to flip back through my notes. I can just look over at the poster board and be like, okay, and then go back. And so I also have character profiles that has what the characters look like, because you don't want to say at the beginning that one has blue eyes and then later mess up and say they have green eyes. So I have these character profiles. I have what the types of like magical beings, like what powers do they have? What can they do? How do they fit into this world? And I have different things about the worlds, what each kingdom looks like, what is their habitat. And so I have to sit down and figure out all of that. Now, some of that will change as I'm writing the story, because I'll be like, oh, I want them to do this instead. So then I have to go to all my notes, change it in the notes. And then if it changes from something earlier in the story, I have to go back, make sure that I catch it in the story. And that also helps with beta readers. If I miss something, they'll be like, this wasn't the same. Like, this doesn't make sense with this.
Nice. That's
And
great.
so then I'll sit down and I will always know kind of how I want the story to go. And I'll have ideas for like scenes. Like I have a note app, the note app, and I have one, it's Sam's book, which is the one I'm doing now. And it's just, if I am like driving or doing whatever, and I get an idea for a scene or even just a line that I want in the book, I'll stop whatever I'm doing and I'll put it down, whether I'm voice dictating it or I'm typing it out, so that I can print that out later and have it to go back. And then I just kind of start writing the scene. And as I'm writing it, I don't know exactly how it's going to go. I'll know like maybe one or two things I want to happen. And then I'm just kind of, I just write it. I just type and it just comes out.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Do you edit as you're writing, or do you critique? I should say, I'm not going to say edit. Do you critique it right then, or do you just spill it out and get it out?
So I usually will go back. It kind of goes, sometimes I'll just write it and keep going. It depends on like if I need to get the story out of my head, like if I've kind of figured out where it's going. But then sometimes I'll go back and reread what I've written and tweak it as I'm doing it. But usually once I get half of the book written, I will go back and redo all of that. And then I send that to beta readers. And then they'll give me their edits, like their notes. And then I'll go back and revise whatever they talked about. And then I write the rest of the book. And then I send that to those same beta readers and new beta readers who haven't read it yet. And then they give me their critiques, and then I'll go through and revise it. And then I'll send that to a new set of beta readers who haven't read it. And I basically do that until I don't have very many critiques. So I have a lot of beta readers. Most authors only have like a handful, but I have probably about 15 or 20.
That's
and
great.
I send them to them in batches, because for every single beta reader, they represent a different whole group of readers that are going to be reading your book.
Yeah.
So it's like I use probably 98 or 99% of the suggestions that they give me, because, like I said, they represent this huge group of readers. So if it's something that they don't like, or that's really confusing to them, or that they makes them cringe or whatever, there's going to be thousands of people that feel the same way.
Yeah.
And so you just have to keep that in mind. And so it's a process. Beta readers are probably, in my opinion, the most vital part and important part of my process, like hands down. And so I do several rounds of beta readers.
That's so cool. I just, my question about the critique, I have often thought, I wonder how much artistic gold has never happened because people are too afraid that they're not going to be good at it, or they start and they don't like it and they go at it with, rather than just letting the creativity flow and just like putting it on paper or putting it on canvas or putting it whatever, like I don't know. I've just often thought, I wonder how often like it goes nowhere because they critiqued it to death before they ever gave it life.
There is a statistic, I believe it's only 2 or 3% of people that sit down to write a book finish it.
I believe it. Because I've sat and I've tried, and then that's what I end up doing is I go, no. And then I just,
there are people, if you have that mindset where you end up critiquing yourself to death, the best advice that any author will tell you is don't go back and reread it. Get your first draft out. Get the whole draft out without rereading it.
Yeah.
And then you can go back and critique it, or then you can send it to someone else and let them critique it, because your first draft is always going to be complete trash. Always.
See,
I will write my first draft and be like, did I graduate the 8th grade? How did this happen? Like, it's insane, because your first draft, no matter who you are, is usually just trash. And one thing that's interesting is a lot of traditionally published, like really big authors, they don't use beta readers. They just use their editors.
Interesting.
And that's always really interesting to me. But, with some people, but then they go through several rounds of edits.
Yeah.
And so their editors kind of work as beta readers, but I would never be able to do it without my beta readers, because they just represent all these different readers that you have. And they kind of have a unique aspect that I don't want to say the editors don't have, because editors are freaking amazing, but they just represent different people as opposed to, you know, one or two people being the only ones to put their eyes on it.
And they don't have like skin in the game really, other than to just consume and want to enjoy it. And I feel like that's a little bit more of a pure process maybe for them.
Now, obviously, these traditionally published authors are wildly famous, so whatever they're doing is working for them.
Yeah, right.
That's just not the process that works for me, just because I have my beta readers. I don't have them like quote critique it. I have them take notes as they're reading of just every little thought that pops in their head.
Yeah.
Even if they love a scene, because if they love a scene, I know that's something I'm probably going to need to keep in the book and not take out.
Yeah.
And so I just want them to, as they're reading, just be like, oh, that was weird, or what does that mean? And they will do it. They'll have a Google Doc. And as they're reading, they'll just take notes the whole time. And so it's really interesting to be able to see inside these readers' heads as they're reading every little thought that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, this conversation is I'm just digging this so much. Here's my, like, as we kind of maybe head towards wrapping up, like if you could sit across the table today with 11-year-old Jamie, what would you say to her?
It gets better. Because that was something I didn't know when I was younger. I don't even know. I just don't be an idiot in college. Because I just kind of...
And don't wear chevron dresses. No.
God, yes. I just kind of went crazy once I hit college because it was like I felt like I was finally free. I did a lot of cringy things, a lot of stupid things, and a lot of irresponsible things that I just... You know, first of all, the cringy things. Oh my God. I still think about some of the stuff and I'm like, oh, I just want to crawl under a rock. I hope I never see that person again as long as I live. And so, you know, those kind of things. But the most important thing is 11-year-old me just kind of thought this sucks. And it just got worse and worse as I went through high school just because of how my home life turned out. And so that's what I would tell them. It gets better and you just need to keep that in mind because at the time, once I hit about 13 years old, I was just like, is this how life works? Like, just because it was all I knew.
Yeah, sure.
And it, that's what I would, it gets better. Just keep doing what you're doing. Be responsible. Don't be irresponsible.
Jamie, we have something in common that I picked up on earlier and it's interesting. I feel like you had a similar situation where you were maybe parented by a lot of people who weren't your parents.
Mm-hmm. I thought about that too.
And I have found that to be actually an incredible blessing in my life because I feel like I was able to learn from a variety of people and have a lot of different people love me and show me things that I wouldn't have seen if I was kind of just in the little nuclear family. And I'm just wondering, I feel like when I've read your books, I see that in your books some.
Mm-hmm. Like when I was in high school and stuff, my friends' parents had a lot of influence on me. One of them, her name was Patty Brown, and she was one of my really good friends' mom. And she was so fun. And she was a single mom. And so it was always interesting to see how her as a single mom treated her daughter as opposed to mine. Mm-hmm. And so I lost touch. I don't really talk to anyone I went to high school with anymore, with the exception of like maybe one or two. And it's just kind of via online. But I was friends with her on Facebook. And when I started posting about my books and stuff, she would always comment how proud she was. And her daughter, she actually passed away. And her daughter sent me a picture and said, I just wanted you to see what was on my mom's nightstand. And it was the computer because she had been in the middle of reading it. Oh, it was. And so, it's just, and all my friends' moms, like there's,
and Winnie's Winnie's raised by her mom, like single parent, right?
Yes, she is. And so, it's actually all of my characters had some kind of random traumatic, story with their parents, because that's kind of just always how it is in books. But the main character of the book I'm writing right now, she's the first character where she just had a very great home life, a very normal home life where, both of her parents, were still together. They treated her great and all this. And I just wanted to have one character at least where she didn't have a traumatic backstory. Everything traumatic that happened to her was in the present. Mm-hmm. And so it's fun to write her because she has a scene. And I think this scene with her, I can't remember if it's in the book I'm writing or if it was in Eternum, which she was a side character in book 2 of the Vincular Realm duology. She thinks to herself, this doesn't happen to normal people. Like there's one part where she kind of looks around and there's like a dead person. There's like 2 dead people on the ground and she's just been through this whole traumatic experience. And she thinks to herself, this doesn't happen to regular people. Regular people don't look around and see dead people on the floor. Like, you know, and I think in the book I'm writing, she thinks, you know, like that I grew up with, you know, 2 normal parents. And this is like, how is this happening to me? And I feel like that's something as a reader, when you're reading it, you're thinking, you know, it's crazy how this stuff is happening to these people. And they're just like in fantasy books and they're kind of taking it in semi stride. And then you have this one character who just had this normal, you know, plain upbringing and she's just completely freaking out. Like, why is this happening?
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's also
relatable.
older. She's 31. And so she's just kind of in this, what in the, you know, what is going on with this? And so she is a fun character to write. She's a really fun character to write.
You like messing with her a little bit?
Yeah, she has so her book is actually a retelling of the original Little Mermaid. It's not, there's no mermaids or anything like that, but she's kidnapped and she's taken to a different world and she is spelled to where she can't speak or communicate. She is or anything like that. And so it's kind of, if you're reading it, you probably wouldn't realize it's a Little Mermaid retelling if you didn't know it. But once you know it, you see, oh, okay, I see all of this and how this is happening. And she's a fun character to write because she's just, every time something happens to her, she's like, what in the hell? Like, what is this? And so it's fun to write. And she's kind of, you know, with her upbringing, it's like something that I saw my friends have, you know? Like one of my best friends that I was roommates with for years, like she has 2 very loving parents that are still together and she's really close with them and really close with her sister. And so I got to watch how she was. And so that's kind of, I have to draw from that inspiration instead of personal inspiration for a character like Stassi and kind of how that works out.
Oh, I love this. I could talk to you for 4 hours about this. Unfortunately, we kind of need to wrap up, though.
I know. I was like, I actually have to take my dog to the vets.
Yes, I know. And I've got somewhere I need to be, too. But we've got 3 questions we want to ask you at the end that we ask everyone. So,
okay.
Yeah. First question is, what is your coffee order?
So at home, it's just coffee and a nut pod. But if I go to Starbucks, it's a skinny vanilla latte. But if I go to this little locally owned place called The Human Being, they have something called the Nutty and Nice. And it's a chai latte with sugar-free hazelnut and sugar-free caramel and macadamia nut milk.
oh my
It
goodness.
is so good.
Ooh, that sounds
So good. And
fantastic.
it's less than 40 calories.
What?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to listen back to that order and go make somebody make that. And
I know, right?
Good luck finding someone with macadamia nut milk.
I
That's
know,
the
yeah.
only place that has it.
That's awesome.
You
All
have
right.
to make your own, which is probably expensive.
It's so good.
But
It's
amazing.
so good.
Okay, so do you have a favorite cocktail?
I usually just drink Captain Morgan and Diet Coke, but I actually randomly went to Fridays when I was at this book convention because one of the
I
girls,
haven't thought about Fridays.
me either, one of the girls that was there is from Arizona and she's like, we don't have Fridays there. I really want to go. So I was like, okay. And they have some kind of, it's like a cotton candy martini.
Ooh.
And I had them sub the vodka with gin.
Ooh.
It was so good. It was so good.
Nice.
And so that's just something random that I just tried. And I was like, I don't even know if we have a Fridays here, but I was like, I need to find out.
Yeah.
I need to go get one.
What about travel, Jamie? If we were to give you tickets to go wherever you wanted to, put you up in a really nice, lovely, swanky place, it's all expenses paid, where would you want to go and why?
I don't have a clue in the world. I would
Really?
probably go. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's so many cool places. Like I've always wanted to go to Salem, Massachusetts and look at all the witch
Yeah.
trial stuff. But I also, would like to go to Europe, which I have a signing in Europe next year in Edinburgh.
Fun.
And so I'm getting the chance to go there and it's going to be fun. But also, I don't know. There's just so many cool places. Like, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I don't like making decisions. So I am so indecisive when it comes to stuff like that. So I would probably spend like 2 or 3 months trying to think about it.
Well, I could go on a totally off trail of that. How in the world does someone who writes characters like that, this is who they are and what they're going to do, but you don't like making decisions? That's actually encouraging because it's like, oh, okay, you can work around that.
Characters have to make decisions that get them to a certain goal in the story.
Okay, there you go.
So when I have to make decisions for them, but with me, I overthink everything.
Gotcha.
I overthink everything.
Okay.
And so I'm just like, well, if I get this one opportunity, where would I want to go?
So you're gonna spend the next little bit thinking about that, and
I will, and I will never decide. I'll just be like, I'll just pick some place. It'll be cool no matter what it is.
That's true. Because if you go in with the right attitude, any place is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you're an inspiration to me. You're a lovely friend. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you? I think you've kind of mentioned Amazon, but like specifically like your website, your socials.
So I do have a website. I usually tell people if they want to find me to do either TikTok or Instagram.
Okay.
If they want to DM me, they're going to have to do it through Instagram because I have my TikTok DMs turned off because otherwise I'm flooded. But I like Instagram. It's more of like a personal platform, I feel like. Like not my personal Instagram, but my author Instagram.
Yes.
But TikTok is fun where people will come into the comments of my videos and because on TikTok, I don't just talk about my books. I do a lot of book reviews over books that I like to read or like book memes or just kind of, just random videos about something weird that happened. And so it's more of a, as opposed to just being my author stuff like Instagram, it's more of my life, I guess. And so it's usually one of those. It is jah.hdj.books, both of them. And it's because when I started them with my friend Heather, who co-wrote August Rain with me.
Okay.
And so, but then she has like 3 kids. Her life got real busy. And so they just became my socials for my author page. And I never changed the handle because that's what people know me by. So I'm like, I don't care. I'll keep it.
Nice. Okay.
And JAH, Jamie Applegate Hunter?
.hdj.
Got it.
.books.
And I'll add it to the show notes too so that people can just click.
Yep.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It was so awesome talking to you today.
Yes.
Yeah, it was nice talking to y'all and it was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
The Celebrating Women podcast wants to hear from you. Email us a voice message to celebratingwomenpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear your story or the story of an incredible woman you know. Become part of the conversation on social media. Facebook.com/celebratingwomenpodcast. On Instagram, search Celebrating Women Podcast. The Celebrating Women podcast has been presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in Cumberland Shopping Center or online at handandstonetyler.com. The Celebrating Women podcast is created and hosted by Mandee Montana and Ashley Fisher. Support the show for as little as $3 per month at celebratingwomenpodcast.buzzsprout.com or visit our show notes. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Celebrating Women podcast.